Hey, welcome back everybody. I am Kurt from Von Precision, and today we're going to talk a little bit about primer seating depth and what that's going to mean when we need to put a new primer in a fired case and some of the differences that can make. So let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys sort of how I do this. Now, you don't have to do it this way, but it works very well for me. One of the things that I really like to use is this RCBS. It's a universal decapping die, and this works really well. I'm pretty happy with this tool. I don't like to deprime and resize my case at the same time. What I like to do is to get that spent primer out of there and then get these things nice and clean before I start running them up in my resizing die, or actually, for in my case, just a neck sizing die. So all I'm going to do, just pop the primer out of there like so, and these things here, they're just doesn't mess with your neck at all, doesn't mess with your case, simply pops the primer out. Whoops. Time to go fishing. So part of the primer seating portion of this is to make sure the brass is really clean, right? And of course, this also ties into other things like bullet seating and just general case prep, really. What I do is I just take some nice warm water and just give these things a real nice rinse. I preheat my oven to 275, and it only takes about 5 minutes or so for these things to dry out real good. So what I do here, I just empty them out. I have a cookie sheet that I've stole from my wife. Set them out on this here with a little bit of tin foil on there. That just, I don't know, just something I do. As the tin foil, you'll see, starts to get really dirty over time, just because all the minerals and stuff in the water. So I just crinkle it up, throw it away, and put a new sheet on there. So all we're going to do is pop these in the oven for, well, about 5 minutes. And you do want to make sure they're nice and dry, though. And we'll move on to what this video is really about, which is seating those primers. Okay, so before you can seat the primers, you have to make sure that the primer pocket is absolutely uniform as far as depth goes. Now, if it's too wide and the primer fits loose and sloppy, the case is no good. You can't fix that. Throw it away. Go buy new cases. So this is the little Lyman tool here, and it works really, really good. There's a video I did here. I'll leave a link to it right up there, and oops, you can go watch that. But what we're doing here is we are cutting the depth of this with this here, and the shoulder here, all we're going to do is come down on that shoulder. The shoulder needs to meet the head of the case, and you'll feel this as you're going through this here, that it's cutting, and then at some point it's just going to spin kind of freely and just be real easy. So there is a uniform primer pocket. Now, you want to go through all your cases like this, and it's not hard. It takes a little bit of time, but it's not hard to do. So just get them all nice and uniformed, and then we'll show you how to seat these things. Now, I highly recommend you do this on brand new brass, but there's a good chance you're going to have to do this again, because as you fire this brass, and this is all once fired, the brass distorts and changes just a little bit. So when you do it a second time, you're going to see that you're cutting just a little bit out. It's not going to be a lot, but it's going to be a little bit. But the reason for this is the more precise you can make everything, every little thing counts. The neck tension, the neck concentricity, the wall thickness, the primer pocket depth, all of it, it all adds up in the long run. So you really just want to take your time, and I recommend also just doing small batches, 20, 25 at a time. If you're crazy and have a lot of time, do 100, but I find that small batches work really well. Now, if you're going out to a competition or something, and there's it's a 100 round minimum or something like that, then obviously you'll have to do more. But when I go out and shoot, I don't go out and shoot 50 or 100 rounds. Not typically. Not that I haven't, because I have. But typically, I'll go out and shoot maybe 20, and I give myself plenty of time in between, just to make sure the barrel cools down and things like that. So it takes me longer to shoot, but I'm more about the precision and making that shot than I am, I don't want to send 40 pieces of lead downrange trying to hit one target when I could just be very precise and do all my math right and all my ballistics right, and just make that first shot count. Because especially if you're in competition or hunting, especially hunting, because you don't want to use you don't want to be out there shooting animals and wounding them, or hitting them in the leg and crap like that. So the more precise you can be, the more confident you can be in your ability to shoot and load, the better off you're going to be at every shooting situation you can possibly think of. So put the time in up front, small batches, get to learn it, get to understand it, and you'll be better off. So I'm going to finish these up here, and when I'm done with that, we'll show you what the seating looks like and the seating depth. So stay tuned. Okay, so we got the primer pockets uniformed. The next thing we're going to do is just resize these, and all I do ever personally is just neck size. I don't ever I don't do anything else. So what I do is I'm using this unique case lube, and so far I've been really impressed with it. It's good stuff. I just put just a little bit on the necks, not a lot, and that just sort of helps with the lubricity of shoving this case up into the die. Not that neck sizing dies don't usually cause any issues, but boy, it just glides in and glides out. So helps reduce run out induced into the cases. So, and a little bit goes a long ways, a real long ways. Stuff is just slippery and it just goes on everything. So, I don't know. So far, so good, right? So, some other important information here is before you ever seat a primer, you want to make sure that everything else, every piece, everything that you can think of to prep your brass is done before you ever seat a primer. Simply because when you seat the primer, you can't go back and do this kind of stuff. So just get all the brass prep work out of the way, and then we'll get on to the seating stuff here. So all right, so you hung in here long enough, so thanks. But now we're actually going to seat some primers. So all cleaned up, brass is prepped. Let's see a couple of different ways we can do this. Okay, so one way is the Lee hand priming tool. Several companies out there make them, but this is the one that I own. Whoops. Anyways, so how this works is there is a shell holder in here. This is a number 2, which is good for 243. So we're going to just lay a shell or a primer down in there. Take the case, and these just squish up in there with the little lever. What I do, so what I do is I squish it up in there, turn the case about 3 to 4 times, and what that does is make sure that it seats as evenly as possible. Again, notice different loading blocks, right? So I had a primer flip over the wrong way here. So we'll flip the primer back over, put this back on, and squeeze that up in there. There you go. So the other method is to just do it on the press. So let's take a look at that. So Lee makes these really cool little primer tools here in small or large rifle primers. And they just go in here, and as you push this down, the primer will just go right up inside the case here. So all we do is take a primer, put it in right here. Okay, with the primer set in there, we're just going to lower this ram down, put our case in here, and that will just go right up in there. Give it a good push. There you have it, one-seated primer. Okay, so we went through a long process, but we should probably look at why we did this, and that's right, more fancy art. So why did we do this? Well, so if you look at a case and you have your primer pocket, and of course there's a flash hole in there, and over here there's a illustration of the primer being slightly below the case head, and same with here, right? If this is the primer, we're slightly below the actual case head. Now, optimally, you're looking at 2 to 5 thousandths below the case head, and up to 8 thousandths, and that's kind of a, well, it's more of a preference thing, I believe, but realistically all we're looking at is you have to be below the case head. So here's the problem. If you're not below the case head and you're actually, if this primer is extruding from the case, then you have a very unsafe condition. Not cool, right? So what can happen is when you close the bolt, you actually run the risk of detonating this primer before you intend to. So it's very important to get these below that head of the case. Now, how do you know how far you are? Well, another really cool thing that the dial caliper will do is zero this thing out. There you go, all zeros. And just run this thing out just a little ways. Notice here on the end, put that right on the primer, okay? Push this in till it stops. This one here, we're 7 thousandths. Actually, we're 5 thousandths. I didn't have a very good push on that. So 5 thousandths there. Now this one here is the one that we seated in the press. Okay, so, and this one here is the one with the hand primer. So back to zero. Run that out. We're going to just take this and push it down right on the top of the primer so it's nice and level. And there we're at basically 4.5 thousandths. So we're within a half thou of the hand primer compared to the press. Both are Lee products, which in my experience, they've been phenomenal for years of doing this. And so what you'd like to do is just get them very, very uniform within 1 or 2 thousandths, give or take, and that will give you the best performance. You don't want one that's, you know, 0.001 and one that's 0.010, and because the flame will enter the case in a different form than it would if everything was very uniform. And you want that uniformity to ignite that powder as close to identical as you possibly can. Now, it's never going to be identical, but everything that we do, you want it to you want to focus on getting it as close, everything as close as you possibly can. So personally, I like to run mine between 3 and 5 thousandths. That's where I find that I'm just comfortable with it. It's what I like to do. I don't like to go too deep. I don't like to go too shallow. So I pick between 3 and 5, and you'll find differences in different cases and the way it cuts and all kinds of stuff. But the biggest thing is you know, this is all nozzler brass right here, and I find that if I take the lineman tool and I cut them all the same, I'm within usually about a half thou between different lots of brass. So anyways, on to the next thing, because there's so much more to learn. There's a huge amount of information coming your way. If you like this video, the other videos, give them a thumbs up, subscribe, and please share the videos, because that helps this channel out, get some more exposure, and gets all kinds of people with just like you and I with the same interest doing the same thing. And there's a lot to learn, and I don't know it all. I recommend you guys all, everybody out there looking, review all the channels out there with some reloading. You pick up little bits and pieces from each channel, and that's the best way to learn, is just get all that information and put it to practice and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Different guns are different, and cases and bullets and powder, and nothing is the same. And so the more you can get out there and research and try this stuff, the better off you are. So anyways, folks, thanks for watching, and stay tuned because lots more to come.